The United States and Israel cannot attack Lebanon, cannot attack Palestine with impunity. They have been enjoying this for such a long time. That's coming to an end. Just imagine for how many decades Hollywood was producing these sort of contents that these Muslims, or you cannot find a single movie with a Muslim in it that Muslim is the terrorist that is killing somebody or is blowing up some building. No, we are against a huge empire of propaganda. They say that Greater Israel didn't happen. I would say the Greater Israel exists today, or existed before the war against Iran.
And you know what's the sickest thing about it is that you had decades of war on terror, which was a war against an image created by the West itself. And we all fell for it.
There are many people for decades in Iran arguing, why are we letting all these GCC countries using the Strait of Hormuz, the United States, Israel, everybody's using the Strait of Hormuz, while they have sanctioned us and we're not able to use it to our benefit. What is that?
All right. Good day, everyone. We are here today with a very special guest. We are here with Nima Alkorshid of Dialogue Works. A very interesting backstory between Nima and myself. I remember seeing Nima's show, and I was often complaining with my brother Dimitri Laskaris about how the anti-imperialist sphere and the geopolitical sphere online always rotates the same old white men. And I actually emailed Nima. I said, Nima, you need to diversify your guests a little bit. And Nima was surprisingly open and respectful and said, Brother Karim, you may have a point. Maybe I'm going to diversify a bit more. So that was a really positive response. And I said, hey, Nima, why don't we're going to have a chat together? And Nima was like, yeah, why not? So, Nima, welcome on our show.
It's an honor to be with you, Karim.
Thank you. And it's an honor to be with you as well. Nima, there are so many questions that are in my mind when I think about somebody who went from Iran all the way to Brazil. I find that these kind of personal stories very interesting. I myself, I'm from the Netherlands. I was born in a small town in the north of the Netherlands, Groningen. And my name is Karim, so I'm half Algerian, half Dutch. And I went to the other side of the world, to China, to do my PhD and then my postdoc, and now I'm working as a professor at the university. And I did a bit of digging in your background, Nima, and I saw, oh, wait a minute, we have some similarities in that sense. Of course, different parts of the world. But can you tell us a bit what made you leave Iran as an Iranian, and also a bit what you're doing in the place that you live now, and why you started a geopolitical channel? I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, actually, I graduated, in Iran. I did my bachelor degree in Iran, and it was all in Persian. And I started working for the government in Iran, and one of the highest offices of the government is the governor office in the state of Khuzestan, which is in the southwest of Iran, close to Iraq. The Khuzestan is basically producing 80% of the Iranian oil, the state of Khuzestan. And I was living in the city of Ahvaz, which is in the capital city of Khuzestan. Then I was right after, I did in Iran. When you graduate, you have to do your military service. It's mandatory. There is no way to, just escape that. So after being graduated, I did my military service in the Iranian naval in the army of Iran, in the navy, in the northern part of Iran. Then there was two options for me: studying master degrees in Iran or getting out of Iran to know. I wanted to go. For example, I went to Cyprus. I did my master degree in Cyprus, in North Cyprus. Then after the Cyprus, I got back to Iran. I was thinking of working or doing something or starting or doing the PhD degree, and I decided to do the PhD degree, then going to the working for in Iran or outside Iran. It didn't matter that much for me, because for me, what I was so curious about to know everything around me. In those days, I was so young and I didn't have much experience. I didn't have much of responsibility. Nothing. It was me and me. Nothing. I had no commitments in those days. So I went to Cyprus, and after Cyprus, I got the. I applied for various universities in Australia, in New Zealand, in Germany. I got one from Germany. I went to Germany for 5 months. I started my PhD in Germany. 5 months I was there. Then I received a scholarship from Brazil. Brazil was somehow, when I got it, it's like, oh my God, what is this? I'm going to go to Brazil. And everybody was telling me, don't go there. Don't. Even my advisor in Germany said, why are you willing to go? Why do you want to go to Brazil? Dangerous. Don't go there. These people. He said, I know. I'm going to take the risk. I want to know Latin America, because I don't know how is it in Europe, but in the West Asia, the people don't know Latin America. The majority of the people, because of the propaganda machine, as you've mentioned, it's all about the United States. It's all about Europe. If not the United States, Europe. And you hear nothing from Africa. You hear nothing from Latin America. You hear nothing. Recently, we hear from Asia, from
A
China, because
bit, yeah,
because
a
of the
bit.
rise of China, how China is getting powerful, and with the case of Russia, how Russia in the war in Ukraine is changing the whole geopolitical change that is coming to the Eurasia. But that wasn't the case. That wasn't the picture during those. I'm talking about 2009, something like that. Nothing of that sort has happened, and China is still in the background. And so I said, no, I want to go. Even my family said, why are you don't know Brazil? I didn't know. Actually, I knew nothing about Brazil. When I came to Brazil, I thought that I'm going to speak, maybe Spanish, because my understanding was the whole Latin America, they speak Spanish. And I came to Brazil, I went to the university talking with the people saying it's all about Portuguese, nothing Spanish. So I started learning Portuguese, and so that life has changed since then. Before wrapping up my PhD, I participated in we have some sort of entrance exams here in Brazil. If you want to go to public universities, to federal universities, and it's different from the private universities. So I came here and I did the exams, 4 days of assessment, exams, written exam, oral exam, everything. I remember in 4 days of exams, I lost something like 7, 8 kilograms. I lost, because it was a huge sort of burden on me. And I had to, I had to compete with the people who studied in Portuguese, who did everything in Portuguese, and I had to compete with them. That was a huge issue. But after all, I passed. I I am right now, as you know, I teach at university, and since 2017 I am teaching. And this is my story. I didn't want it. Just it is one step after another. You don't know what's coming next. That's why you go with the wave, with the sort of mood you have. It wasn't by default. It wasn't on purpose. I'm deciding I'm gonna do this and that. No, it all happened. It's part of my story. I didn't. I didn't know if I'm gonna stay in Brazil, but I'm here in Brazil since 2013. I am here in Brazil. I'm so comfortable. People are good. The culture is so good. We have the mixture of Europeans, Africans. We have everything here, and it's so beautiful. And I think one of the issues that you've mentioned in those emails that you sent me about the racism, which is so real. But when you come to Brazil, you see how the people are so we have the Lebanese people, Syrian people, Japanese, German, Italian, Portuguese. It's a huge cultural mixture. You look at Brazil today, and I think the whole society, you see some sort of racism in Brazil, but racism is not between black and white. Racism between the rich and poor. You know, it's different from what you see in other parts of the world. But Brazil, after all, the outcome of the society is so good. The Brazilian people are so, they're so warm, they're so welcoming, they're so good. You don't feel that you're from outside. I remember when I was in Germany, I have many friends and family. I have family members in Germany for years, for 20, 30 years there. And but I didn't feel that I'm home. But the day after I came to Brazil, I told my wife and said, "Here is I don't feel that I'm outside of Iran. I really think that I'm in Iran. When I go out, people are saying, 'Good morning,' and the guy doesn't know you, and on the street they start talking with you, and they don't care about where you're from or what is your background. The only thing that they care, they want to make some sort of communication with you. They want to talk, they want to know you, they want this is the huge impact, which was totally different from my experience, from the experience I had in Germany. So this is brief, you know, somehow some sort of abstract of what has happened so far to me.
Well, it's actually quite recognizable, Nima. And so in my case, I actually did a PhD first in the Netherlands. Now, Netherlands, of course, is a neighboring country of Germany, so you could say it's kind of similar. But I would say the Netherlands is even worse because the Dutch are super direct, so it is very hard to deal with when foreigners come to my place. But for me, it was the same, Nima. I got an offer suddenly out of Hong Kong, China, for a university for a PhD position, even though I was already doing my PhD in the Netherlands, and I was like, oh yes, I wanna be over there in Asia, in a very famous metropole. And the first thing people said at my university, Nima, exactly the same. Like, you want to go there to that part of the world? These people want to come here. Why the hell would you go over there? It was so assumed that you don't want to go over there, even though if you would just check, the university that I was going was already ranked 30 something of the world. I mean, a very, very prestigious university. But in the Netherlands, even though the Netherlands doesn't, well, it's a very good university, but it doesn't even get close to the quality of the universities over here. They just assumed that it was ridiculous as somebody from the Netherlands to go there. And the same thing as what you're saying also, like, oh, and that the culture is not free, and there's no academic, all these assumptions, you know what I mean? But eventually I went over here, and very vibrant academic culture. I mean, it's leaps and bounds ahead of what I am used to in Western Europe, to be very honest. And same with you. I came here in 2011, and I never went back. And I was also, even though it's a very different culture, I also felt really, really home. And the university where I did my PhD, I went for a couple of years to Malaysia, and then I came back. And where I did my PhD is now also where I work as a professor. And hopefully, indeed, I can also stay for much longer here. And what you're saying about Brazil, Nima, is also very interesting to me, that you say it's very diverse. Now, I also had a friend from Brazil, a black Brazilian woman. And she told me also that on the one hand, Brazil is very diverse, but on the other hand, you still have that kind of skin color discrimination. She says, for example, she was a ballet dancer and she just did not get any good positions in Brazil because of her skin color. And she actually went to Europe to get better ballet positions, even though, of course, Europe has its own problems with racism. So in that sense, I guess there are still also issues of colorism in Brazil. But it's very interesting what you're telling me about how diverse it is. So my question then is, Nima.
I
So
think
you
one
stay,
important point, Karim, before going to your question,
of course,
mostly when we are talking about because immigration these days is one of the main issues for these far right racist movements all over the world. Basically, what they're doing, they're saying that the people are immigrating because they don't like their own countries or their home. But that's not the case, basically, for many people, in my opinion. Because when you go from, it doesn't mean that I live better than those people, my friends in Iran. I got back in Iran after 12 years. You know, I saw how amazingly they have grown economically in any aspect you see. They're better. They're living better than me here in Brazil, basically. And you in just considering the economy of the people, the way that they're managing their life, the comfort they have to be close to their family, to mother, to grandma, grandpa, and how facilitating that would be for kids, for example, whoever has kids, or you're getting a lot of support from the family. You're getting a lot of support from the culture because this is your own culture. And but when you get out of your country, you have huge challenges. The first issue is going to be the language. You have to learn something new, and as time goes by, it's too difficult in the initial years, in my opinion. Then you're gonna get familiar with various aspect dimensions of the cultures which you were not aware of, you didn't know anything about. That makes you, you know a better a better human being, in my opinion. The immigration is not about, you know escaping the bad situation in your own country, but it's a new sort of gate that opens up on you, and you can learn a lot through immigration, going to other countries. I think, after all, if we assume we are all human beings and these borders exist because of the history, because of what has happened, but after all, this sort of communication are necessary, in my opinion. We have to go outside. We have to live in, for example, in Netherlands for 1 year or 2 months, 3 months, to know the culture, to know the people. These are important things. These are not because these days you see the people in Europe is changing. These people are Muslim people are changing the Europe. The face of Europe is not anymore Europe. These are, it doesn't make sense to me because I don't see it this way. I see how the people are getting better in communicating with each other. That's a huge change, in my opinion. If we assume that, it's that the you see the United States, Brazil, Canada. These countries are countries of immigrants, basically. They came here. The colonialism and what has happened, and you see, we know the history, we know what has happened. But after all, you see various ethnicities coming here and coming together and being a country. You ask each and everybody who comes from Europe, Africa, from Asia. I'm talking basically about Japanese people, Korean people, Chinese people in Brazil. They feel Brazilian, because the country was able to convince them that this is your home. I think there is nothing wrong with this sort of concept. That's why I think the immigration is not the issue. The immigration is the solution, in my opinion, in c- considering various dimensions of the geopolitical problems these days we have. And so sorry for interrupting you. You can go ahead with your question.
no, absolutely. You can interrupt me all you want, Nima. You're my guest. Um, I, I, I couldn't agree with you more. It seems that we are very similar in that sense. I always say that and this is actually true. So I lived in Malaysia, Hong Kong, Osaka, in Japan, and I can tell you this: all the papers that I've written, the research that I've done, I my best work, I would have never been able to do that if I did not live abroad. And my
Exactly.
work focuses a lot on the effects of geopolitics on psychology. So I often say I'm a geopolitical psychologist, cultural psychologist. And this is really true what you're saying, that once you live abroad, it somehow broadens the mind. You see, you see the common humanity. When I lived in Malaysia, among the Malaysians, Indians, the Chinese, in Japan, very monocultural. Here in Hong Kong, very multicultural, but still majority, of course, Han Chinese. And it just changes you. And once you see all these issues, for example, in Europe, I come from the Netherlands, and all the complaints about immigrants and Muslims, you just realize how provincial and how narrow minded it is once you live all over the world. And you just see, guys, it doesn't matter where you go, everywhere where you go, you have your people and you have people you don't like. You know, whether you're in Brazil, Iran, China, Netherlands. But if you don't do that, if you don't experience that going abroad, then that's very hard for people to understand. You know what I mean? It's so. I was just talking to my sister Vanessa Beeley. She's a journalist, and we were talking about how easy it is, Nima, when you look at Ireland, how easy it is to manipulate people by just having one guy who has a darker skin do something bad, and you have riots all over the country. And they are burning houses of dark skinned people and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, it's so easy to manipulate people because they have no experience with diversity. You understand what I mean? It's so easy, for example, for Zionists to rile up tensions in the West. You know, by having just one brown patsy, one Muslim do something bad, you just need one false flag and the whole country is flaring up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And then mostly that one false flag is, they, Kareem, when it comes to Muslims, and I think Muslim is a better sort of word to describe all these people together in the West Asia, from Iranians, from Yemenis, from, because we know, we if you go to ethnicities, we are various ethnicities in the Middle East. We have in Iran we have Persians, we have Kurds, you know, we have Turks all together. It's a huge. I don't know if you have ever been in Iran, but when you call Iranians, it's about total different cult ethnicities coming together, but they feel all Iranians. You go to Lebanon, for example, in Palestine, and you have they have their own culture. It's different from Saudi Arabia, for example. But when you say Muslim, you bring all of them together, and then it's important. I think for the Muslim people, they have to understand that for many years, they have been, since the British Empire, even before the British Empire, they have been manipulated by the imperial mindset because they wanted to divide them, they wanted to conquer, they wanted to rule. They knew how important is the West Asia. They knew how important are the resources. So it was all about resources. And even when we have, today in 2026, we're still talking about the problems between, for example, Iran and Saudi Arabia, between Qatar and Iran, between UAE and Saudi Arabia. It's not even between UAE and Iran, between the two countries within GCC countries. This is the problem. You know, they have to understand that there is no way to get away with the difficulties that you've been facing for many decades without understanding that peace and prosperity comes through, mutual understanding. You can have your own differences, but after all, One of the main reasons that I'm saying this, because of the war in Iran. The war that has happened in the Middle East was a huge, in my opinion, is a huge geopolitical change that is happening. Because for decades Iran was arguing in the aftermath of the Iranian revolution. The head of the Iranian, the Iranian supreme leader was saying that you are building these American bases. What is the meaning of that? Iran would never attack Saudi Arabia or Qatar. That's never it's impossible, but by any measure. There that What is the meaning of that? But they were arguing, no, this is the security, this is going to bring peace to the region, security to our country, this is going to protect us. And we've seen what has happened during the war. And finally, we had a war. The United States, together with Israel and the Zionist entity, started this war against Iran, believing that they wanted to do the regime change in Iran. They failed. But still, you don't see any sort of change in some of these GCC countries. There is no learning curve. You see the population. I think what is important when it comes to the Muslim that I've mentioned before, that the war in Palestine, I think what is happening to the Muslim people, it's all related to Palestine. And Palestine brought all these people together. The Palestinian issue somehow destroyed the legacy of British Empire. The British Empire was based on their legacy, was dividing the countries, making the differences. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Oman, Kuwait, name it. So they divided the whole region in different sects, parts to manage the region. I think what is important that Palestinian issue is bringing Sunni and Shia together, and they say this Wahhabi sort of mm, movement within the Islam, that they call it Islam. In my opinion, it was created by foreign intelligence,
The
by
West.
CIA and Mossad to manipulate the Muslim people. Then they say, so these guys are terrorists, that we created them, are terrorists. Then all Muslims are terrorists. Be careful. Just imagine for how many decades Hollywood was producing these sort of contents, that these Muslims, or you cannot find a single movie with a Muslim in it that Muslim is the terrorist that is killing somebody or is blowing up some building. We are against a huge empire of propaganda. They have everything, and we are little. We're nothing. We're little dot. I don't see mm, the alternative media in a little. We're not even a little dot on the screen, because they dominated everything for many years. So this is the moment that the Muslim people should recognize that there is no difference. You're Shia, you're Sunni, you all. I would say you're Jewish, you're Christians, doesn't matter. Coming together. These people are manipulating you because of their intentions. The British Empire, the legacy of the British Empire with the creation of Israel was that dividing the West Asia, then creating Israel, then dominating, letting Israel dominate the whole region. They say that greater Israel didn't happen. I would say the greater Israel exists today, or existed before the war against Iran, because they had the total dominance over GCC countries because of their economy, because of how dependent they were on the United States. So it wasn't the greater Israel, but it was the greater America coming to the Middle East, America managing everything, having the proxy Israel, managing the whole, and the economy is total, the economy of GCC countries, or their policies. They don't have foreign policy. Have you ever seen a distinct foreign policy from one of these GCC countries that go against the United States? I have never seen that. And I think this is the time that those changes are happening. The United States and Israel cannot attack Lebanon, cannot attack Palestine with impunity. They have been enjoying this for such a long time. That's coming to an end. I think it's not dependent on Iranian people. It's all dependent on the acts of resistance. People from Yemen, those courageous people who fought the United States together with Saudi Arabia, together with UAE, all of them, they tried to, before coming to Iran, they tried to destroy Yemen. They tried to destroy Ansarullah in Yemen, but they couldn't do that. This is the importance, I think, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, going to Lebanon, going, I would say in Syria, it doesn't matter what has happened so far in Syria, but the people in Syria, they're still there. That's the foundation of the Syrian people. And Syria is so important in many aspects. The culture, Syria was the heartland of the culture for the Muslim people. But you cannot let that happen to Syria. You have to do. Assad is gone, but the days of Syria are not, Syria is not dying, it's not passing away. Syria is reborn in itself, is entering a new era, in my opinion. And they have to decide, the people in Syria, with the help of Lebanese people, with the help of Palestinian people, they're still there. I think the whole concept of bringing Shia, Sunni, all sects of Islam together is important for the future of the region. It's not something religious, it's something geopolitical. That's important. Without that, you're not going to have any sort of peace and prosperity in the region for anybody. You cannot sit in Iran and say, I don't care about Palestine because they're far away from me. No, if you don't care about Palestine, the issue, they're going to go after you. You're going to be the next target. And many people may understand and should understand that.
Absolutely, Nima. Oh man, there are so many things you say that really resonate with me. I also have a Substack, and I definitely invite you to come over there. I write a lot of articles also, and I've actually been writing for years about the Hollywoodification of the Muslim in the West and how that serves imperialism. I've just been hammering on that all the time, how that Hollywood image of the Muslim has helped US and Israeli imperialism so well. And you know what's the sickest thing about it is that you had decades of war on terror, which was a war against an image created by the West itself. And we all fell for it. It was such an amazing conspiratorial plot of the West. You create this kind of Hollywood boogeyman, that shouting Muslim, and then you have these ISIS types who are exactly like that. And I never forget when I was talking to Laith Marouf, and he said that these Wahhabi death squads, these extremists, he said they are the most westernized Muslims of the world. And it's so true. They're racist, they're violent, they're sectarian, they're domineering, which is just pure Western colonial imperialism. You know what I mean? But when you see, for example, pre the invasion of the West, when you see Syria, for example, I talked to Kevork Almasyan about that quite a few times, and he also said that the diversity what you would see in Syria, Muslims, Christians, Jews, everything, and he said nobody cared. People were even intermarrying. You didn't even know from your neighbor what's their exact religion. And he said nobody cared. We had tolerance. He said it was until the West started to play divide and conquer, we got sectarianism. We started to hate each other. You know what it's a very, very Western thing, which has been extremely successful. And what you're saying about Palestine, indeed, Palestine is Palestine, is in particular, of course, October 7th, cut open that wound in the sense that it showed, like it exposed the kind of world, the kind of system that has been created by Western imperialism, and not just in West Asia, Nima. Also it also completely unraveled our Western societies. It doesn't matter if you're in Germany, it doesn't matter if you're in the Netherlands. You get arrested and beaten up for being against genocide. So that whole Hollywood fable that we believed in, that not only that all these Muslims are scary people, but also that in the West we are the democracy and we are the example of open-mindedness, everything unraveled. Everything got exposed after October 7. So in that sense, I agree with you. I think that it opened our eyes. It showed the world to what's really happening and how the West really works. However, and this is a question for you, and you talk to a lot of specialists, how do you see that going now? So we see Iran. Iran had a very strong response. Initially, you could say, destroying many of the US bases. We were all very triumphalist in the anti-imperialist sector of the media. We're all very happy in a sense. I also talked yesterday or a few days ago with Ali Alizadeh and Ehsan Safarnajad. So I had them together on a panel, and they are very nuanced. So they say Iran is now playing the long game. Ali Alizadeh says that Iran may be losing a bit of internal momentum. So he says that the voices inside of Iran right now, political voices that are more trying to be friends with the United States and negotiate, he said these voices become stronger again, and he thinks that's dangerous. How do you see that, Nima? Where do you see it standing right now? Do you feel that Iran is still on the right track? Do you feel there's a lot of momentum? I'm personally very worried at this moment. How do you see it?
I think my opinion is that Iran, they, because those people who were the argument, we have to understand the Iranian society, the different parts of, basically in Iran we have two or three movements, political movements. One of them is the some sort of liberal, we call it the left party. The left party doesn't mean the left as it means in the West. The left is the reformist party. They call it reformist party. We have the conservative party. We have two sects of the conservative party. One of them is to the far right. One of them is right in the middle, something like that. But if we assume that, considering the two conservative parties together and putting it against the reformist party, what has happened during the war, the American attack on Iran, that the reformist party has totally changed, because these people were basically mostly uh, studied in the West, or they were part of negotiations with the West, or they had their sort of understanding of the West, that they think that the only path to prosperity, to a better future, gonna pass through the West or together with the West. This was the mindset of these people, reformists. But what has happened during the war, which was a huge, it's only a nuclear bomb happening in this party. They have been demolished. The mindset of the reformists has been demolished by the war, because they thought that many of these people, basically liberals, they thought that if the United States attacks Iran, while we know that when I'm talking about parties, I have to emphasize that the people in Iran, the majority of the people, they didn't have this sort of feeling. In some sort of internal issues, domestic issues, people usually like the reformist party better than the conservative party. And but when it comes to the foreign policy, I think that's a huge difference. The people don't want Iran to bend. They don't want Iran to back down. They want a better Iran. But the fear before this war started was that if the war starts, what are the impacts of the war, and how this war going to influence the Iranian people, the Iranian economy, the Iranian future, and everything, the life of the people in Iran. And are we going to be able, with our military, looking at the, because for many years they were talking about, look at the military budget, the defense budget of Iran, comparing to the defense budget of Iran, comparing that with the Saudi Arabia, it's not even comparable. It's I think 10 times the Saudi defense budget, 10 times the Iranian defense budget. It's not even comparable. That's why you when you're not familiar with the nature, with the identity, with the reality of these wars, you feel that everything is about money, how much money you put in this in that. But I think we've learned that that is a false sort of assumption with the case of Ukraine. We knew that what has happened in Ukraine, the whole West, the whole NATO went against Russia in Ukraine. And how the military industrial complex of Russia was able to outproduce the whole NATO countries. It's amazing. Look at what has happened. For those, but many people don't know. They're not interested. They were not hearing that much from Ukraine. And the news from Ukraine is totally dominated by the West. They reshape it, they wrap it up in something they want to uh, they want to help to convince people that is they were spreading their own propaganda through their society to the society of the in Iran. It doesn't matter if you were in Iran, you were in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, whatever, in Europe. They are all bombarded by this sort of propaganda that Russia is losing for 4 years. We are approaching 5 years of the war, and nobody knows what's the reality of the war. That's why I think many of the Iranian people didn't know. I'm talking about many Iranian people. I'm talking about, you know, literally mostly young people. They didn't know, they haven't seen the war between Iran and Iraq, because Iran and Iraq war was 8 years of war. It was a huge war, huge impact on Iran society. But the young people, they didn't have any sort of memory of those days that Iran literally was fighting against not Iraqi government, but all together with GCC countries, with the United States, with Soviet Union. They were all, China was supporting Saddam Hussein. They were basically fighting each and everybody on this planet. And then Europeans were supporting Saddam Hussein. So they didn't have that sort of memory. They didn't know what would happen if the war happens. But the war, the reality of what has happened, 40 days of war, the first round of war in June 2025, later on in February 28, 2026, the two rounds of war, they brought this sort of reality to the Iranian society. No, we are prepared. We know how to fight back. We know how to stay against the American empire. They're not going to destroy us. That is the change that is coming to the Reformist Party. They understand that they're not, the system is not fragile, the people are not fragile, the economy is not fragile the way they thought before this war started. So they see the resistance from within. That's why they're changing. I don't see they're changing their political views, but they see the reality of the war, what has happened so far with the Strait of Hormuz, for example. These reformists mostly were against the Strait of Hormuz, because the Strait of Hormuz is not something new. It happened because of the war. But there are many people for decades in Iran arguing, why are we letting all these GCC countries using the Strait of Hormuz, the United States, Israel, everybody's using the Strait of Hormuz, while they have sanctioned us and we're not able to use it to our benefit. What is that? So, but these reformers say, no, we cannot go that far. If you go that far, they're gonna do this and that. Nobody would accept it. And they had this sort of, their own, because they, before, the way they're thinking about the West, they don't see any confrontation, even in their mind, with the West, with the empire. They are already defeated in their mind. This is the problem with these people, with these reformist sort of. But what has happened during the war, in my opinion, the war has destroyed that understanding of the reformist party. The current president of Iran is part of the reformist party, but he doesn't feel that way anymore. I understand the concern of the people that say maybe those people who are in favor of the West, improving the relationship with the West, are getting powerful in Iran. No, that doesn't happen, Karim. Those days are gone, in my opinion. Those days are literally gone. And every reformist, or right now the negotiations, they're not reformist in these negotiations. We have the government that is reformist, but you cannot say the foreign minister is a reformist. He's not conservative, he's not reformist. He's literally so connected to the leadership of Iran, which we know he has some sort of, he doesn't have, he never, the leadership in Iran, the supreme leader, the former supreme leader of Iran, has never shown that he's more in favor of the conservative or reformist. He tried to stay in the middle to manage the situation in Iran. But there are people who are somehow concerned, and I totally understand their concerns. I totally share those sort of concerns they have. But I don't think that Iran is going to get back to Iran it was before this war. The war has changed Iranian idea, because the worst thing has happened to Iranian people. The worst thing, which was the war, which was the death and destruction. So far with the Iranian war, they killed more than 3,500 people, and they destroyed the schools, hospitals, name it, everything, universities, bridges. They hit basically the police stations in the cities. It doesn't have anything to do with the military. And what they were desperate, the pharmaceutical plants, these pharmaceutical plants were so important because Iran is producing something that nobody in the region is producing. If they can get it from those medicines that for cancer or these sort of rare diseases that comes basically from the United States or from Europe, and it's so expensive, but Iran is producing them domestically. That was the main, I think. I would see some sort of objective in attacking those pharmaceutical plants in Iran, because they wanted Iran to be even more dependent in the aftermath of the war. But that's not going to happen, because it's all about is homemade factories, homemade, sort of under infrastructure. It's all in Iran. They have the knowledge, they have the technology. It's all homegrown technology. It's not coming from the West. That's why if you destroy it, you can you can make some sort of disruption in the production of those medicines, for example. But it's not going to be forever. They're going to rebuild it. They're going to reconstruct everything. I think that's my understanding of Iranian society today. Economically, they're feeling a lot of pressure from the war, from the what has happened so far, because we have to understand. But this is not something new for Iranian people. They knew the sanctions. They have been under these tremendous sanctions from the West for decades, since basically in the aftermath of the Iranian Revolution. So this is the reality of Iran today. That doesn't change if Iran negotiates with the West. I think many people, it's not just about Iran. You go to Russia, the people are angry on Vladimir Putin. They say, why is he still talking with the United States? Maybe because the war, the worst thing, they see what Ukraine has done to Russian people. At least the estimation is 250,000 people were killed. Russian people were killed during the war. Looking at the part of Ukrainians, it's all about something like 2 million, 2.5 million. It's a disastrous war. How many innocent people were killed during this war? Those Ukrainians who had nothing to do with this conflict, the Russians, they see what Russia sees as these are all Slavic people. And the racist empire doesn't care about Ukrainian people, because they're using Ukraine as some sort of proxy. And they can, Lindsey Graham said that. We can fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. This is the reality on the part of the West, and Russia knows that. The Russian leadership understand the anger from the society. They understand what is at stake with the case of Ukraine. I think that's why the whole calculation is to negotiate, to talk, at least to diminish the harm that may you know they're negotiating because they want to reduce the impacts of the United States, the empire, on their society, on their economy. This is the whole concept of negotiating, Because after all, we can say the United States, the US empire is collapsing, is doing this and that, but this is not going to happen overnight. It's a gradual process. It takes time. And you have to, if you feel someone going to hurt you, you're not going to get closer to him to hurt you, or you're not going to, hit him first. You see what he's doing, then you manage him to get, to manage the empire. I think Russia and Iran are in the process of managing the empire, not making deals with the empire, not making agreements, because they know the reality of the empire is to destroy Russia and Iran, to destroy China. I think the final goal is get to China. But before going to China, you have to dominate the West Asia. You have to come with the greater Israel concept. Then you have to dominate the Eurasia, the landmass, the Central Asia. Then go after China. Because without capturing, dominating there, you cannot go after China. In my understanding, but I don't see that happening in Iran. In Iran, the people are so prepared. They know what has happened. The picture, the reality of the war is so clear in their mind. Even the most reformist guy in Iran, if he feels differently, he just silent. He doesn't talk because he knows what has happened during the war and how capable Iran militarily and economically to fight against the United States. And this is my understanding is this. I'm not concerned about Iran. I think Iran is getting better. Iran is getting better and better. I see Iraq is getting better and better. I see Iran, because during this war, we had American and Israelis using the airspace of Iraq attacking Iran. These are the same people, for since 2003, the Iraqi oil is going to Washington. Washington is selling the Iraqi oil. They did that to Bashar Assad in Syria. And they're doing this to Venezuela. This is the mindset. But Iran has changed that. I think if Iran decides to, or the acts of resistance decides to put air defense system in Iraq, then in Lebanon, that's a huge change in my opinion. I see the future brighter than it was before. I see the acts of resistance getting better. Yemen is getting better. Iraq is getting better. Iran is getting better. Lebanon, after those assassinations, we know the government in Lebanon. We have to say that I'm not optimistic, but I really feel that Hezbollah is getting more powerful in Lebanon. That's why Israelis are so desperate. Israel is not in a better position. Their situation, their air defense system has been weakened during the war, and there is no way for the United States to get back to put all those beautiful big, air bases with those radars, with everything they had in GCC countries, because the reality of the region has changed. That would hugely benefit the acts of resistance. But the important things, not materially, the important thing is psychologically what has happened to the acts of resistance. They know that they're capable of fighting back and winning the war. I think this is the outcome what has happened.
Yeah, amen, Nima. When you say the psychological part, as a social psychologist, I can very much agree with what you're saying. And there's so many things you were saying, and I wanted to jump in on that. I was like, yes, yes, yes. So, for example, when you said, so we talked about how October 7, of course, already shattered a myth about the West. Okay, that was step number one. I think step number two was once Iran stepped over that, how can you say that border, that limit, it crossed that kind of glass wall where it before would abide by the sanctions. Everybody could use the Strait of Hormuz. It was like you said, it was kind of ridiculous. But the whole world, Nima, was under that psychological Hollywood spell of the omnipotence of the West and the omnipotence of the American empire. And everybody was watching Top Gun, and everybody sees white Western heroes in every movie. People are psychologically so incredibly indoctrinated, especially in the West, by the way. And once Iran shattered that glass wall and started fighting back, that is the moment a myth suddenly becomes, how can you say that the emperor has no clothes? Suddenly you realize, wait a minute, we're dealing with human beings here. It's almost as back in the day when the Japanese defeated the Russians, and they were like, oh, wait a minute, we're beating Europeans here. So that myth, that Hollywood myth, is dissipating, and I think that's a very important psychological barrier that has been broken, not just by, of course, the Palestinian resistance, but by Iran. That's number one. And about those reformists, I've written about this also lots of times. I'm currently doing a study here. I have a very big grant here in China to study something called colonial mentality. And a colonial mentality is how people internalized a kind of superiority of the West outside of the West, and that influences psychologically the way they deal with the West, both geopolitically but also on an individual basis when you're dealing with Westerners. For example, when you have a channel, you mostly talk to Western analysts. You know what I mean? I'm joking a little bit, Nima. But what I'm trying to say is that I'd also talked to Michael Hudson quite a few times. He's also often on your show. And Michael Hudson always says something that I have been saying for a long time as well, is that many of those reformists, like you just said, they're educated in the West. And guess what? Besides Hollywood, one of the best indoctrination programs of the West, I always say, is the Ivy League school. Ivy League schools. All the brightest from all over the world, also in China, are sent to Ivy League schools in the West, where they get indoctrinated with imperial propaganda, with Western neoliberal economics. They go back to their own country. They try to implement all that stuff, and they internalized all that superiority of Western civilization and liberalism. And I always say countries need to stop doing that. I mean, when you see a society like Iran, so well educated, such amazing intellectuals. I mean, it's just, I've been listening to so many Iranian intellectuals, and I'm like, Iran, just like China, is a society that really does not need to send its brightest to the West. Really, they don't. You know what I mean? And I think that is also something that is currently crumbling. And I hope personally that indeed in Iran that those reformist types that you have in every society, by the way, I call them comprador class. They're often kind of a comprador class, a bit of internalized colonial mentality people. You know what I mean? And my dream is that these people are not influenced, don't have any influence in their societies anymore. You know what I mean? Because I'm very afraid of that, Nima. I'm very scared that these people somehow, the West with all its money and its hybrid warfare and puts money in these people, NGOs and BBC Persia and all that kind of stuff, and then slowly starts to mentally colonize people again. What do you think? Do you think that there's the chance or what?
I think your fear is real. I have the same. I share the same sort of feeling about the reformist parties in Iran, and because they're self-defeated in their mind, they say we are nothing. You see, we are nothing. They're everything. If they attack us, they're gonna destroy everything. If they decide, if you want to be a better country, you have to get closer to their sort of mindset, to their sort of theories, to their sort of management of the economy, everything Western, which is not the case, by the way. I think many, you look at China, you look at how China has grown. I
It,
think
it
they
it's
call
the opposite. Sorry for interrupting, Nima. It's actually the opposite. It's all these reformist types who have kept their countries poor. You know what I mean?
exactly.
The moment you become a slave to the West, you're not going up. It's just not going to happen.
Because you have to buy all the propaganda that the empire has or produces, and there is no way you go that far. You just imagine uh, we have Michael McFaul. in Stanford, he still, after 4 years, the guy destroyed Ukraine. We had a country called Ukraine 5 years ago in 2022, 2021. There is no country like the country has been destroyed. 85% of the economy, 80% of their GDP is in the hand of Russians today. The eastern part of Ukraine produces something like 80% of their economy. That's gone. And the guy is still, he's in Stanford. He was the American ambassador to Russia. He still talks, Russia is winning. Look at CNN. Says, so we have lost the war in the West Asia. We have to get back in, Ukraine in the war against Russia. Even those people who are against the war in the West Asia, who are backing the war in Ukraine, and they don't see how the country the country Ukraine was destroyed. How many people were killed? The country was something like 59 million, Karim, and right now it's less than 20 million. Look at what they've done to the country. And these people don't care. They're coming out posting, Ukraine is winning because they're receiving, a 200 millions of, weapons or missiles. These are jokes. Look at the reality of what has happened to Ukraine. This is the problem. I think when it comes to Iran and other countries, they don't care. I think if in this war, Iran has decided not only attacking American bases in these countries, but attacking infrastructures in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and UAE, the Zionist entity would be more than happy. They were enjoying how Iran is destroying these countries because they're becoming more dependent on the United States and Israel. But I think Iran totally understands that the leadership know what's going on. They recognize the difference between the they don't see the friendship, but they recognize how the Zionist entity is manipulating the region. And when it comes getting back to the reformists and these people reformist parties, and they think that they have been for so many years in the West, or they studied in the West, they did their PhD or bachelor, or maybe master degree in the West. They wake up and you know they read New York Times, CNN, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg. There is no critical thinking on their part. They're just reading and absorbing everything that's why, because they're accepting that reality. They see this, they see what they're, that reality that is not reality in fact, but they wrap it in some sort of reality to sell it to these intellectuals, I would say, in the West. Those people who are feeling that they're better than the other people. If I studied, for example, in the United States, I'm better than you, that you studied in the University of Tehran, and I understand better. I understand the West better than you. You know, this sort of mindset. I think those days are gone. They're not going to be anymore there, because at least from what I know, because I I I totally understand the Iranian society, the different moves. I was, since I said I left Iran in 2013. I left Iran in 2009, and I got back in 2012, and later on in 2013 I left Iran. But I know all the movements in Iran. I know each and everybody within these reformist parties. Pezeshkian, I see Pezeshkian just like this, you and me talking to each other, and I know these people. I'm familiar. I've read the books of the reformist parties, majority of them, because they producing a lot of books and articles in Iran to reshape the mindset for many years. By the way, those days are gone. Those days are gone. Nobody gonna buy that sort of argument anymore. Iran knows what is the future. The future would be independence. It's not only on the West. They don't. I think the revolution. I don't know if you're familiar. The revolution in Iran has started with an important statement. We don't want to be dependent on the East. We don't want to be dependent on the West. I think the moment you recognize that, you're going to grow from within. You're going to learn from other countries, but you're going to basically depend on your abilities, your knowledge, your sort of understanding for your economy, for your society, because Iranian society is not similar with the society in the United States. It's different. They have their own characteristics. So you have to have a recipe for your country. But what these reformists usually producing is it's a copy of what is going on in the West. That doesn't work. It hasn't worked so far. And I think those people are getting weaker and weaker. I'm concerned about those things that you've said about these people, but they're not that much powerful anymore in Iran, at least from what I've seen and from what I know, and as the result of this war.
Yeah, and the West has, of course, this is one of the biggest problems that I've always complained about with many of my guests. The West, of course, has a monopoly on global media. I think that's one of the biggest problems we have right now as people who have a kind of anti-imperialist sentiment, because I mean, there was one little exception back in the day, that was TikTok, so everybody could see what was happening in Palestine. And of course, TikTok is also bought by the empire right now. So we have no more. There is literally nothing. They can just cut you off if they want to. You know what I mean? And I just, yeah, that's it. I'm still very very worried about that. I actually had many more questions, Nima. This was very very good. We good vibe. We see things very similar, but we're already at the hour. So you're probably very busy today with many of your guests. So I'm gonna end it here, and I'm gonna say already. I hope I can invite you for a round two in the near future.
Sure, sure.
Great, Nima, and wishing you all the best. We keep following you. If there are any, are you still there? I see a kind of.
I'm here. I'm here. Yeah, I can hear
Oh,
you.
okay.
I
Okay,
can hear
no,
you.
your image is disappearing, but it's a local recording, so that should be fine. Um, yeah, Nima, where can people find you before we wrap it up?
Yeah, they can find me on YouTube. The best way to find me, and Dialogue Works, and they can find me on X, and Substack, and Patreon, and Rumble. Yeah, basically, I'm on all of these platforms that we can use to, to to communicate with the people all around the world.
Okay, great. So I'm going to definitely look you up. I didn't know you were on Substack, by the way. But you definitely have to connect on our Substack. I'm gonna give you a lifetime subscription so you can read my articles, because I think there are many things that you can actually relate to when I hear you speak. So that I will.
Sure.
Okay, I will add your current email. Would that be good, or
Yeah,
do you have
that
any other
could.
email?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
Okay,
this
I
is the
always
email
give my
I
guests.
use. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I always give my guests a lifetime subscription. You can read some of the articles. Nima, thank you very much. Have a good day. This was
Thank you.
great, and hope to,
Thank
to
you.
talk to you again.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, your name in Persian, we pronounce it Karim in Persian.
Actually, that's the way my Algerian family says it the same. They say Kerim. So it's very very similar.
Yeah,
Absolutely
yeah.
great.
Thank
Okay,
you.
brother. Talk to you next time.
Talk to you. Talk to you. See you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Static crackles, voices rise. Truth breaks through their velvet lies. A screen of fire, a shield of steel. BettBeat media makes you feel no borders, no change. no silence reaches.